Once we raised the issue of federal charters, which was raised by Teddy Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, Senator O'Mahony in 1939, and then suddenly it subsided. Once we raised that, all kinds of issues of corporate accountability, of corporate compliance, of depowerizing corporations, of giving more power to the consumers and workers and pension funds, come to the forefront. It's a crucible. It's a framework. You don't just go one here, itty-bitty there. It's a framework to organize the shift of power back to the sovereignty of the people, away from the increasing absolutist sovereignty of giant corporations. What is the word here? The word is subordination. I urge you to use that word. We must create a movement of subordination of corporate power to the supremacy of the power of the citizens in this country, the people in this country. And the second approach is displacement of corporate products, services, and that's what this convention is about. It's displacement. It's saying, what are these Monsantos doing to our food? We're going to displace genetically modified food with the preservation of the small farm, with the preservation of more decentralized, close-to-market food producing, without using chemical agriculture and genetic modification. Displacement means full Medicare for all, which displaces, just the way Medicare for the elderly did in the 60s, it displaces the health insurance industry. Just as solar energy, decentralized, distributed through co-ops and other non-giant corporate delivery systems, displaces more and more of the coal, of the gas, of the oil, of the fossil fuel giants, Exxon and Peabody Coal. That's displacement. Displacement comes from refusing to enter McDonald's, refusing to enter Starbucks, refusing to enter Walmart's. How clever Walmart is. It charges you as taxpayers and then tells you they're giving you a break in the store. Like going on Medicaid because they won't give their workers health insurance. Like getting all kinds of community tax breaks, displacing small business, which small business doesn't get because Walmart's the big guy on the block. There are a lot of ways to expand displacement. Go by every booth and see, is that displacement? Is this displacement? I've just given you a few examples. Another displacement is to displace NAFTA and the World Trade Organization. So they cannot pull down our standards. They cannot subordinate environment, labor, and consumer rights of health and safety and well-being to the supremacy of corporate, commercial, international trade. That's what it's all about. It's circumventing our democracy. It's circumventing our democratic processes, our courts, our regulatory agencies, our legislature. You can't buy anything in your hometown from child labor, products made from child labor in this country because it's illegal. But our country, because we've signed on to the World Trade Organization, can't pass a law prohibiting importation of products made by brutalized child labor abroad because that would violate the WTO, and a country that would take us to Geneva would beat us in those secret courts under the WTO. We couldn't have been first with airbags if WTO was around. We'd have to go to harmonization committees organized by WTO bureaucrats in Switzerland, and where we'd be driven downward by other countries on the committee that didn't want airbags to be mandatory in cars. Subordination and displacement. Why do I emphasize these kinds of approaches? Because giant corporations have learned to game our political economy. They've learned to neutralize regulatory agencies. They've learned to buy elections. They've learned to block access to the courts. They've learned to get in the minds of our young children so that the very trademarks with this mass marketing, undermining parental authority, selling pornography, violence, junk food, junk drink, dangerous toys, they're getting into the minds of our children at a very young age. They know how to game the system. And when they know how to game the system of accountability, when they know how to bring trade unions to their knees, when they know how to spend tens of billions of dollars after Katrina and not help any of the victims of Katrina and get away with it, when they're able to deny people insurance, even though the insurance industry has incredible tax advantages and are making huge profits, when they can increasingly perform military functions abroad, as Blackwater has, Halliburton has. More and more of the U.S. military is being contracted out to profit-seeking corporations, and if you don't think our government is accountable, try these multinational corporations for escaping both Iraqi law and U.S. law. They've learned how to game the system. They've learned how to engage in greenwashing. They've learned how to co-opt all too many good environmental groups. They've learned, and that means we got to confront them with a new strategy, a new analysis, a new kind of access, reflected by what's here, in part. That means we've got to read more. We've got to talk with each other more. We've got to take books like The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein that is in the bookstores today. Jim Hightower's books. Even my books. We have to listen more to Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! We have to expand indie media. We have to get her and other programs on more of the multimedia approaches, including what gets through the internet. We've got to take our children to rallies and marches and town meetings and courtrooms and hearings. And then we get ready for the real movement here. And here's how we should look at it. First, we take away their symbols. That flag is ours. That Pledge of Allegiance is ours. Because that Pledge of Allegiance ends with a phrase that corporations cannot have allegiance to, these large corporations. It ends with a phrase, with liberty and justice for all. Not for some and not for a few, but for all. And then we look and we see what can turn around this political economy. What is the single most important institution that can turn it around? And it's 535 people, men and women in Congress, who put their shoes on every day like we do. Congress has enormous constitutional authority, far greater than the executive and the judicial, which is why it's surrendering so much of it on the installment plan to both the executive and the judicial. It doesn't want the responsibility. That's our job.